Kubernetes for humans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode or special episode of Kubernetes for Humans podcast. Today, with me in the show in KubeCon, we have Charity, right? You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Charity. I am the co-founder and CTO of Honeycomb.io. And here at KubeCon.
So, Charity, how long are you coming to KubeCon?
This is my second time, I think.
Really? What happened in the previous KubeCon? It was less relevant or?
I honestly, this sounds really static. I mostly go to conferences when they invite me to talk.
No problem. It's a good, and we just had a panel together, right?
At a panel, yeah.
Yeah, you can maybe catch it already on YouTube.
Yeah,
or
probably.
where the CNCF is posting the panels discussions. So maybe tell us a bit about your history. Yeah, I know that you are a known figure in the industry, but just for anyone that is just joining us now, a bit about your background, what led you to software.
Sure.
From there, founding your own company in a very crowded and a hard space, right? Observability is everywhere.
Yes, it is now. I do not have a CS degree. I don't have any credentials of any sort. I was a dropout music major.
What did you play? Or is music?
Played classical piano. And but I've been running computer systems since college. I had my first job when I was 17. I've been an ops engineer for the past, many years. And most recently I was at Parse, mobile backend as a service, and we got acquired by Facebook. And the process of trying to make Parse reliable was really what led Christine and my co-founder and I to start Honeycomb, because we were building a kind of next generation platform before the tools really existed, and it was impossible, and realized we couldn't live without those tools anymore. So
yeah, I would say Parse was a huge thing back then, right? To give a bit of a background to anyone who don't really know Parse.
Yeah, it's mobile backend as a service. It was like Heroku for mobile apps, where we would run your app. You would just have an API, SDKs, and we would make it work. We had over 1 million mobile apps running in Parse by the time I left.
Yeah, it was. I remember back then it was so popular, and I was shocked that Facebook acquired it and then killed it, right? It doesn't exist. I'm not mistaken.
They killed it. I have a grudge against Zuckerberg
because of that.
Yeah, well,
no, it's a good reason to have a grudge.
Down, and they didn't have to. People wanted to buy it off of them, and they were just it's not worth the lawyers' fees or something. It made me really angry. It was a really great product.
Mm-hmm. No, again, as a user, it was really a great product. I think it was when I was in the degree, one of my projects ran on Parse, and I was like, that's cool, that's neat.
I feel like we're both sitting this way. Maybe we could talk to each other a little bit more. Gonna adjust my seat. Is that all right?
Okay, great. Yeah, much better. Okay, so we talked a bit about about the Parse and your background. So now let's talk about what you are currently doing, right? Maybe give a bit about
Yeah, so Honeycomb was founded almost 8 years ago, which is insane. And back then, everything was about monitoring. Nobody was using the term observability, and we were the ones who kind of originated it. We were trying to find a way to articulate what we were doing was different. We knew what we were doing wasn't a monitoring product, and it wasn't based on metrics, and it wasn't just logs either. But it was about making a product that developers could use to interrogate their code in real time in production. To be the term observability comes from control theory, which is about how can you understand what's happening inside your system, no matter what's happening, just by observing the outputs. And if you accept that definition, then there's a lot of things that flow from it. You need high cardinality support. You need high dimensionality support. You need traceability. You need to have this sort of exploratory, open-ended sort of approach, which are all very different from, a metric is just a number with some tags. You've discarded all of the context at right time. You're just all we have is this number, which means you can only ever ask that question. You can't slice and dice and recombine it. If you have say 100 metrics for your service, and you try to collect a custom metric for every possible combination or permutation, it's something like 10 to the 100. You know, you can't collect that many custom metrics. And if you did collect them and they turned out to be popular, then they would be extremely expensive. And you still can't slice and dice and ask new questions. You can only ask the questions that you predicted wanting to ask in advance. But if you collect that data in these arbitrarily wide structured data blobs, one of those per request per service, or one per span per request per service, then if you have stored in the right way, you know, you could slice and dice, you could ask, you can be like, okay, there's a spike in errors. What is it? With dashboards, you can typically just be, you know, scrolling through dashboards. But with Honeycomb, you can just like go, you know, we'll compute for all of the dimensions inside the bubble and outside and diff and sort them. You just draw a bubble and you're like, oh, the thing I care about is different because all of those errors are, say, Android devices using the ice cream build, using this particular region, this particular endpoint with, you know, a blob size of over 2 megabits. They're returning 504. You know, you just like, immediately you can be like, this is all the way. And so much of debugging actually just boils down to that, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing I care about. Tell me how it's different from everything I don't care about.
I think, you know, like trying to reduce the noise basically, right? Because right now we have enough like numbers, I think, like, again, like monitoring maybe versus observability. Like there are so many metrics and I don't care about most of them. And other than the one that I really care about.
Until you
yeah, it's like, it's so hard.
Yeah. So we started, and for the first 3 or 4 years, I think our definition of observability kind of gained steam. But then everybody else jumped into the game. We're like, we do observability too. So now everyone who does any kind of telemetry is like, we do observability. And it's just kind of like, now the words have no more meaning. So it's a different, I shouldn't complain. This is a good problem to have. It's a better problem than nobody caring, but it's a little frustrating.
So no, I think like it's I must ask, because someone that, you know, we also have like I also have a company in the space, but we are not an observability tool, like we're not a classical observability. We don't do anything that APM does. We do other things. I wonder how it's like to be there in a space that from the outside everyone say the same things. Everyone says observability, and you know, there's you. There's like that Datadog, which is like the gorilla in the room. And then there's like Abdinan, Splunk, Dynatrace, New Relic.
They all took our language. Everyone uses the same word we started using. Yeah, it's really frustrating.
So how do you differentiate yourself? So what's your secret sauce? Or
well, the best way we can differentiate ourselves is if developers try it. Because once they try it, they're like, oh, this is different. You know, and I don't mean to shit talk. A lot of people are getting a lot of value out of their, like, let's call it observability 1.0 journeys. They're getting stuff into their metrics. They're getting stuff into their logs. They're better off than they were before that. But there's an order of magnitude better off that they can be if they start collecting their data in a way that gives them a single source of truth, right? From which you can derive metrics and logs and traces from events, and you can't go in the other direction. So it's kind of an open question, right? I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, the best way is, honestly, we get most of our customers, engineers who have used Honeycomb, then they change jobs and they bring us along with them because they know that it's different and there's nothing, you know. So, yeah, it is frustrating because you find language that describes a problem and people just borrow and it wouldn't bother me that they were borrowing the language if they would also solve the same problem.
Yeah, but, you know, it's like a capitalist world. Like, you know, like they saw it's a cool world, right? Like in the end of the day. And then, yeah, sure. Like, well, why not?
Yeah. So, well, I believe that we will figure it out. I believe that we will try it because the world is getting so much more complicated. Every year it gets harder and harder. And trying to figure those systems out using only metrics and logs is getting exponentially more difficult. And I believe that 2 or 3 years from now, like even just trying to manage your metrics and your logs by the time your systems have gotten to like a microservices level of complexity, it gets harder and harder. And so I believe that people are hungry for different tools and we have a tool that works. So
no, I think that, again, like the signal to noise, I think today is the biggest problem in modern like observability, right? Like I'm using the word. But like in the end of the day, getting the data is not that hard. And especially where at KubeCon, it's like you're 5 minutes away from getting pretty much any metric that you want.
Yeah.
But now what? And I think like that's a real problem. you're talking a lot about like developers. So are the people who are using you the most are the developers, or is it like the ops people, or are you saying developer because you simply mean both?
Yeah, we're building for people who are writing code and need to understand it in production. For the most part, that's developers. Ops people use us too, but like often they set us up for the developers who are owning their code. I mean, that sort of intersection, we used to call it DevOps, and now I think platform engineering, is, it's really for people who need that feedback loop. Like, here, I'm writing this code, now it's in production, I need to understand it. Is it doing what I expected it to do? Is anything else up weird?
So developers are like the main users of the platform. And so and if you look at like modern, like 1.0 observability, like Datadog, I do feel that it's more like directed to the operation people, isn't it? Like, so why is that? Like, why do you think?
Mostly because ops teams carry the purse strings.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who write checks. Like, developers don't typically have.
That's true. So you're saying like that's the reason.
That's one reason. Another reason is that there's still, in a lot of companies, there's this big divide between people who write the code and the people who understand the code, and so it makes sense for them to pitch their messaging at but I just think that, like, increasingly, you can't run your systems as a black box. You have to look under the covers.
I think that it's what separates, I will say, like really good developers than mediocre minus developers.
Yeah.
But the world, I will say, there's a lot of mediocre developers, right? Like if we look at like the guess.
I actually think that it's usually, I actually think that often they're not worse developers. They're just subject to additional bullshit.
That's true as well.
High-performing teams is something I care a lot about, and I think a lot about. But like, you are, if you join a high-performing team, within a couple of months, you are performing at that level. If you join a low-performing team, within a couple of months, you're probably performing at that level, because so much of your ability to ship code and be a good engineer isn't about data structures and algorithms. It's about the socio-technical systems around you. It's about, like, if it takes this team 2 months to ship a line of code, it's going to take you 2 months to ship a line of code. Doesn't matter how good of a developer you are. So it's really about the systems we participate in, and the tooling is part of that.
No, I think like it's really interesting. But so if you look at like the industry as a whole, like let's not take like Purse. I think there are like really, really like a super high performing team, right? Like this was.
The other thing is that people often assume that because Observability 2.0 comes later and is more advanced, it must be harder. It's not.
No, I think it's the opposite, right? Like that's
much easier. It's really hard to like wrap your head and your use case into something you can solve with metrics and logs. Like, they're really hard.
No.
It's so much easier if you can just like gather all the data and then ask your question instead of having to like futz through custom metrics.
I think like it sounds much easier, right? Like again, like but isn't it like a bit of like I'm not sure if it's like an egg and a chicken, but in the end of the day, like if let's say I'm not that good of a developer, right? Like I don't know why, but that's my life. I would probably not even search for you because I'm like, it's not my mindset. Oh, what I need is a different way of looking at my metrics and data. On the other hand, if I'm like a really good developer in a very high-performing team, then maybe I'm like good enough with what I have. So it's like, and developers are so hard to sell and to reach. Like that's what I always feel, that it's like they're like 2% of the industry that is just like making the standards for everyone else, and that's pretty much it.
Yep.
Do you feel the same? Like, or like, what's the?
I think that people are in general not walking around just dying to use new tools. Because learning new tools is hard.
Yeah, no one wants to learn a new tool. Never upgrade a version, never add another tool. That's
absolutely. I think that in order to get someone, in order to argue that someone should adopt a new tool, but you have to be offering them as an order of magnitude better than what they had before.
And this is you, right?
Yeah.
No. I think like, again, like your pitch is so much more rational, I will say, than like the most of the other tools that it does make total sense. I will do like a bit of an off topic here. I read like one of your posts about never build your own database. I must ask about that. Like
I think
Did you wrote your database?
Yes,
You
we
didn't
did.
Write.
Yes, we did.
Was it a mistake? I must ask. Like, I have you in person.
I meant it very tongue in cheek. I have spent my entire career telling people don't write a database. If you think you should write a database, you shouldn't. And I think that that's almost always true.
But
we did write a database. And honestly, I think that we kind of got lucky in some way, because I think that if Snowflake had existed at that time, I think we would have built on top of Snowflake. I also think that we would have been sorry later, or we would have survived, because I think that being able to build our products, being able to build our database around the product that we need has been so transformationally powerful for us. And building it around someone else's database and someone else's constraints would have locked us into a lot of choices that I think would have made for an inferior product.
So you're happy with your own database? Are you
Oh no,
already
constantly miserable with it, but from a good place, from a good boy, I don't know.
No, I think it was like,
It was a tragic necessity.
No, it's like so, I don't know, hard. Like, I'm just trying to think about, like, database are doing so many things. So, but you're happy with that.
It needed to be done.
It needed to be done. No, it's a good answer, right?
Had
Like,
to be
that's
done.
the best answer.
If it doesn't have to be done, you shouldn't do it.
I think a lot of people think that it should be done even when...
A lot of people are like, this sounds fun. That's a terrible reason to write a database.
No. Like, I think, like, I read the post and I'm like, did she actually wrote her own database? It's like, to me, it feels like opening a whole new company, right? Like, doing only database, right? And even those companies, like, most of them are not that successful.
Yep.
Well, I just had to ask that because, I was like, I'm not going to write my own database no matter what.
No.
Okay, but it's good to know. So let's talk a bit about the future. And you said that, like, in 3 years, things are only going to get worse, right?
Yeah.
More metrics, more complexity, more moving pieces.
More services, talking to more, more storage systems, more backends, more third-party systems. All of it's getting knitted together and glued together, and your end user is sitting there just like, suffering.
So other than the new, like, other than the observability space, what do you think is also going to happen or change across our industry? Like Kubernetes, compute layer, Lambdas, stateful application databases. So, like, what's your prediction here?
I mean, I think that this is a great time to be alive and computing, because we're moving farther and farther up the stack, which means that you can, as an engineer, you can do so many more powerful things than ever before.
It's amazing. It's like superpower. Like
it's like having superpowers. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think the really interesting question is going to be like the engineers who grew up in a post-ChatGPT ecosystem versus those, because those of us who grew up pre-ChatGPT, writing software was difficult. And so it kind of, I've always been of the opinion that writing software is the easy part. Like, running and owning software is the hard part. But because it was a bit challenging to write software, it kind of obscured that reality for a lot of people. But now that writing software has become so easy for everyone, like, the main question in my mind is, how is anyone ever going to become a good senior engineer if they aren't actually putting in the time to, like, write code and learn it the hard way? I mean, I'm sure the answers will arise.
Yeah, I guess something will happen, right? Like, I'm sure that there are going to be senior engineers, like, in a couple of years as well. But I can, like, I am using ChatGPT, right? Like, obviously.
It's great. It's for people who are already great at writing code. It's a real accelerant. For people who have never really learned to write code the good way, it makes me very scared.
Yeah, I wonder. Like, but maybe, it's like the Java people and the assembly people, I don't know, like, or the C people and assembly, like, they were like, how can they write, like, so much abstraction? So ChatGPT is, like, in the end of the day, it is like another layer of abstraction of getting your thoughts into the computer.
Absolutely.
Wow, it's interesting. Do you think, like, ChatGPT has a big place in the observability area?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of am of the opinion that, you should either write your code or your test. And
one of them.
Well, at least you should write one of them. You should not generate both. And I think when it comes to your observability, that's the thing you should most want to write yourself, because you need to understand your code, right? And the only way to understand it is to like be in conversation with production, watching your code as you're implementing it in production.
So, like,
what I do think is interesting though is that, like, I hope when you're developing with LLMs, you have to be testing in production. You can't just write unit tests.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
my hope is that developing with LLMs, if that becomes just as widespread as developing with databases, then my hope is that that's going to drag, it's going to kind of be the Trojan horse that drags the developers into the modern era and, developing observability-driven development and using production, because there's no other way to do it.
I think it's like a really optimistic, like, like that this will be the driving force, but maybe it will. Like, I think that, every announcement like OpenAI is doing is like,
Yeah.
those guys are like not kidding around. Like, I'm so impressed. Anything else that you want to add, promote, to say?
I don't think so. We're here at KubeCon. We've got a booth. If people want a demo, reach out to us.
You are at the booths all the time?
Not all the time. I'm an introvert. I am there as much as I can stand.
Okay. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Kubernetes for humans.